Have you ever wondered about the number 666, what it really means? Is it really the mark of the beast? Well, I wondered the same thing, so I decided to do a little research myself, and what I discovered is almost unbelievable. I discovered all this totally by accident. The only reason I ever noticed any of it at all is because one day in Bible study, my teacher was trying to convince all of us that mankind had only been here on earth for about 6,000 years. However, modern science tells us that mankind has been here on planet Earth for a couple of 100,000 years, maybe even millions of years. So, being armed with our so-called higher education, I set out to prove the Bible study teacher wrong. What I found may surprise you and shock you as it did me. I discovered a timeline in the Bible, a timeline that was purposely put there by Moses under the direct instruction of God. How I found it: if you go to Genesis 5 and add up all the years that Adam and all his descendants lived until they fathered a son, you'll find that you get a total of 1,556 years that passed. For example, Genesis 5:3 says that Adam lived 130 years and he begot a son in his own image and named him Seth. Genesis 5:6 says that Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. Genesis 5:9 says that Enosh lived for 90 years and begot Canaan. And go on down the line, so on and so forth, all through Genesis 5, all the way to Noah. If you simply add up all those years that each man lived until he had a son, you get 1,556 years. Then to find the next group of the next generations, you go to Genesis 11:10 through 11:26, then on to Genesis 21:5. This is where you can read about Father Abraham, and we find that from Noah's son Shem until Father Abraham had his son Isaac, that a total of 490 years passed during that time. Using the same method, add up each number of years that each man lived until he had a son. Therefore, you go back and you add up all those years, 1,556 years plus the 490 years, you get a total of 2,046 years. So, 2,046 years is a number of years that passed from the birth of Adam in Genesis 5:3 until the birth of Isaac in Genesis 21:5. So, at this point in time in Genesis 21:5, when Isaac was born to Father Abraham, we know that the Bible has told us that it's a fact that 2,046 years had passed. Now, in order to find this number, we simply add up all the years the Bible says that each man lived until he fathered a son. Now, we know this to be a biblical fact because it's exactly what the Bible says. If you add up all those years, it says 2,046 years passed. Now, ask yourself this one simple question. Why would God instruct Moses to write a timeline into the Bible? Because that's exactly what we're looking at. It's a timeline. The writings of Genesis 5 and of Genesis 11 create a timeline. A timeline put there by Moses under the direct instructions of God. Now, this next part is going to be a little difficult for anyone who doesn't know much about the Bible because it's such an alien concept. God, our Creator, returned to planet Earth before the end of the 2,046 year period. Some of you are going to ask when. Well, it happened in Genesis 14:18. If you go read Genesis 14, we're told about a great battle. And if you read Genesis 14:1 through 10, we're told that this huge battle involved at least 9 different kingdoms and at least 6 other tribes. So we're talking about a battle that's involving at least 15 different kingdoms or tribes, whatever you want to call them. So we're talking about a significant number of soldiers that would have been involved in this battle. We don't know how many, but at the very least you're talking about several thousand, maybe even hundreds of thousands, possibly more. We just don't know. Then in Genesis 14:12, we discover that Lot, Abraham's nephew, and his family were taken captive during this huge battle. Then in Genesis 14:14 and 15, we read that Abraham goes to rescue Lot and his family with 318 trained servants. Now ask yourself this question for a moment. How could 318 men whose full-time occupation is either farming or sheep herding possibly defeat the armies of 15 kingdoms or even one kingdom? We all know the answer to that question. It's just not possible. At the present time, we do know enough about ancient history to know that the armies of ancient kingdoms were very well trained. So you ask, how did Father Abraham prevail? Well, he had a little bit of help. He had help from God. He had help from a great king called Melchizedek. It appears that Melchizedek may actually be the name of God. Turn to the book of Hebrews chapter 7 and you can read about Melchizedek. Now, in Genesis 14 it says that Melchizedek is the king of Salem and the priest of God Most High. Then if you go to Hebrews 7 it says, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of God Most High, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom Abraham gave a tenth part of all. That's right, tithing. Abraham knew exactly who Melchizedek was. First being translated king of righteousness and also king of Salem, meaning king of peace, who is without father, without mother, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. So Melchizedek is immortal. He has no beginning or end of life, and he's made like the Son of God, made just like Jesus, because Jesus is the Son of God. So Hebrews 7 plainly says that Melchizedek is made like the Son of God. Now some people are going to say, well, what does that mean, made like the Son of God? It can only mean one thing. It means that Melchizedek is genetically the same as Jesus, because Jesus is the Son of God, isn't he? You see, the book of Genesis is God's book about the genealogy of mankind. That's why it's called Genesis. The topic of Genesis is genealogy. Most of the book of Genesis is telling us about the genealogy of descendants of Adam. These are the same people that God himself referred to in Genesis 6 as the sons of God. Now, are you ready for a shock? Turn to Luke 3:38. It says that Adam was also the Son of God. Yes, both Adam and Jesus are plainly called the sons of God in the Bible. Therefore, what we've established is that Adam is also the Son of God. Adam was the very first human being. Therefore, all those who descend from Adam are the sons of God. Melchizedek is Adam's genetic father, and he is also the father of Jesus. Now, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 45 through 48. It says, and so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last, Adam, became a life-giving spirit. However, the spiritual was not the first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. The first man was made of the earth, made of the dust. The second man is the Lord from heaven. That's right. The second Adam is Jesus. The first was Adam. Here in 1 Corinthians 15, both Jesus and Adam are called Adam, or Adamu, from the ancient Sumerian word. It can only mean one thing. It means just what you think it says. The Bible says both are sons of God, were both created directly by Melchizedek. The reason Melchizedek was at the great battle, the slaughter of the kings, was to preserve the genealogy of the sons of God. Remember, God called Adam's descendants the Son of God in Genesis 6. We know that God's referring to the descendants of Adam because of what Luke 3:38 says. It plainly says that Adam is the Son of God. So, following the list of the genealogy of the sons of God, all through Genesis 5 and to 11, it leads us directly to Father Abraham, Isaac, and then on to Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 1. Matthew 1 starts off saying that this is the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. You see, Melchizedek had to prevent Abraham and Lot from being killed at this huge battle so they could live to pass on their pure genealogy. So now back to the timeline. We had previously determined that 2,046 years had passed from Adam's birth until the birth of Isaac. Now what we're trying to establish is how many years passed before Melchizedek returned at the great battle called the Slaughter of the Kings in Genesis 14:18. First of all, we know that Isaac was born. The Bible says that Abraham was 100 years old. We're plainly told in Genesis 12, not long before the great battle called the Slaughter of the Kings, that Abraham was only 75. So this is a fairly easy calculation. It's 25 years earlier. So this means that in Genesis 12, when God sent Abraham to look for the promised land, that only 2,021 years had passed. Now, in reading Genesis 12:7 12:8, 13:4, and 13:18, we can read about the times that Father Abraham built an altar to the Lord and made a sacrifice. According to Deuteronomy 28, this is supposed to be done at the beginnings of each month, or in other words, at the new moon. So each time you read about Father Abraham making a sacrifice to the Lord, 1 month has passed. Abraham made 4 separate sacrifices to the Lord. Therefore, 3 months passed during his travels from Haran to Canaan. This is in Genesis 12 through 14. Also, we know that Abraham was not exactly 75 years old in Genesis 12 when he began his journey from his homeland to Haran. We're told in Genesis 16 that Abraham lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years. Then in Genesis 16:16, we're told of the fact that Abraham was 86 years old when his son Ishmael was born. Ishmael is Abraham's first son that he had with his wife's maid Hagar, the Egyptian handmaiden. So for Abraham to be already 86 years old when Ishmael was born in Genesis 16:3, it means that Ishmael was conceived 9 months earlier, when Abraham would have been 85 years, 2.5 months old. Therefore, in Genesis 16:3, when we're told that Abraham lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years, and that he had to be at least 85 years, 2.5 months old at that time, when he was living in the land of Canaan for 10 years. We know this because it takes a little over 40 weeks, 280 days, slightly more than 9 months, for a fetus to grow to maturity in the womb. This is when Abraham took Hagar as a wife and when Ishmael was conceived. Therefore, if Abraham was 85 years, 2.5 months old, which is what we're plainly told, when he had lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years. Therefore, Abraham was 75 years, 2.5 months old when he left his homeland of Haran in Genesis 12. So 2.5 months passed from Abraham's 75th birthday until the time he went on his journey. Now, we also have to add up that time of Abraham's travels, and we've already determined that that was 3 months. Then we have to add in the 2.5 months that we know passed from Genesis 12 to when Abraham left to go on his journey. Next, you have to add up the 9 months that Adam spent in his mother's womb, because that's the point in time when the creators returned to planet Earth to plant the seed that would become Adam, the first son of God. That total amount of time is 2,022 years and 2 months. That's how much time passed from when the creators returned to planet Earth to plant the seed that would grow into Adam until they returned at the great battle called the Slaughter of the Kings, when they saved Abraham and Lot from being killed so they could pass on their pure genealogy to the next generation. Of course, Adam had a mother, just like Jesus. Jesus had a mother. It was the Virgin Mary. We just don't know Adam's mother's name. Now, in Matthew 1:17, we're told that there's a total of 42 generations that passed from Abraham until the Christ. And in the next video, I'm going to explain to you how to determine exactly how much time passed from Abraham until the Christ. But I can assure you it's the same amount of time, 2,022 years and 2 months. Bible scholars tell us that Jesus was probably born in the fall of 4 BC. If my calculations are correct, he'll return in either the fall of 2017 or 2018, after another 2,022 years and 2 months. So you see, all the time in the Bible from Genesis 5, from the birth of Adam until Christ returns, has been divided into 3 equal segments of 2,022 years and 2 months each. Now, let's go read Revelation 13:18 and see what it says about the number 666. It says, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. His number is 666. Now, I ask you, what have we done? We calculated. We calculated the true number of the beast. And the real number is not 666. It's 6,066 years and 6 months. The 3 equal time segments of 2,022 years and 2 months each. That's the length of time that mankind is going to be allowed to rule planet Earth. 6,066 years and 6 months. After that, Christ will return and he will be in charge. If you watched the first video, I told you that it seems like the Bible's telling us there's going to be a huge nuclear war in about 2017. This is the time when Christ is going to return. Now let me read to you what it says in Revelation 12:18. It says, "The nations were angry." That means they're at war. "And your wrath has come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants and prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, both great and small, should destroy those who would destroy the earth." Yes, that's right. That's why Christ is returning, to stop the evil people who started these nuclear wars that would destroy the earth. Because the Bible plainly tells us that the earth belongs to God, not to us.